As days went by, Sagim's naivety dawned on him more and more. He began to realize that he had made a mistake disclosing the pact to the queen without a witness, or so he thought. He had heard some rumors that the queen had traveled out of the kingdom alone, and he had a sinking feeling that this does not bode well. Everyone in Tongo knows how the queen loves her entourage. She would never step foot out of the palace without her guards and slaves. Sagim was right to feel uneasy about the queen's unusual behavior and sudden departure from the palace. The queen had indeed gone in search of a way to nullify the pact, the revelation of which she believed was the demise of her legacy. She was desperate to know how the prophecy can be aborted before it ever comes true. She had set out to visit a well-known priest of the neighboring kingdom called Njeli. Tongu has its own high priestess, who is also great friends with the queen. However, remembering how confidently the Gideon had urged her to confirm with the priestess, she knew all too well that her friend priestess will agree to everything Sagim said. Therefore, the priestess won't know of any other way that could help alter this premonition, as such will be the detriment of a kingdom she had sworn to serve. Consequently, Queen Tati decided to see Priest Kunja of Njeli Kingdom. Kunja was well known for his great powers and schemes all over the 5 kingdoms, and he was more than happy to help. He only desired the notoriety that such a task would bring him. Kunja had for so long nurtured a dream passed on from his forefathers to overthrow the kingdom of Tongo. He knew that this was a tall feat and was resigned to having his desires remain a dream until the queen walked into his shrine seeking his help. This was an opportunity he never thought he would have. After listening to the queen, his spirits revealed to him the consequences of averting the pact. He omitted to tell the queen that the curse she was warned about was true and would befall Tongu if anything was done to stop the fulfillment of the promise. Rather, he dismissed the queen's fears over Sagim's warnings and promised to help her with her mission if she promises to follow his counsel. Queen Tati was happy and relieved to hear this and promised to do his bidding every time he gave her instructions. He instructed her to ensure that all the slaves at the service of the royal household were married off to people from other castes. He also advised her to not encourage intermarriage amongst the slaves anymore. That way there will be hardly any slaves with a pure Ture bloodline. Priest Kunja promised to help get rid of all the child slaves born in the palace without anyone noticing, making the queen grin, deliberating that it won't even be noticed as they are just slaves, therefore their lives or deaths hold no significance. There must not be a single female slave in your palace who is not married, no matter the circumstance. Kunja warned her as he walked her out of his shrine, adding, "Make sure you get rid of the hide that the Gilead brought to you that day. It is buried under the big tree in the Gari quarters." Kunja was already aware of Akwala's spirit roaming around his shrine and his anger towards the queen as he had followed her to stop her from succeeding. He could literally feel Akwala's desire to have the pact fulfilled. Therefore, he reveled at the thought of helping Queen Tati. Furthermore, just to agitate the spirit more, Priest Kunja advised Queen Tati to have the ancient royal hide destroyed, knowing it was all the spirit had and needed to prove the legibility of his mission. Akwala was so furious at the queen then that he wanted to harm her, but he could not as the queen was with child, and that child was the one destined to fulfill the ancient promise. Nonetheless, he still desired to punish her. Kunja also warned Queen Tati to keep their meeting a secret, making her promise to see to it that no one knows about the reason for her visit to Njeli, most especially the king. Upon her return to the kingdom, Queen Tati set out to do exactly as Kunja instructed her. She had every Ture married off, mostly to the guards of the royal palace. This caused a stir in the kingdom as guards were of noble blood and therefore could not marry the slaves. However, she would rather have them marry the slaves than her own unborn son. She urged them to keep their slave wives as concubines if they want to, and to remarry if they ever wanted. This convinced the elders that she just wanted the royal slave bloodline elevated. Therefore, it made natives to believe that she was being considerate of the royal slaves, as marrying noble blood releases the slaves from being called just slaves. They will be called their husband's wives or their children's mother, which in a way appraises their caste status. With this, the elders believed in her cause, therefore they all pledged their support, even if it meant forcing marriage upon the royal slaves. The elders made even the king to believe that it was for the good of the royal slaves. Queen Tati was really determined to change the course of destiny and protect her legacy. By then, she already instructed her guards to dig out and destroy the hide before anyone else get hold of it. However, this could not be done, as Sagim had, since realizing the queen's schemes, hid the hide where no one could find it. When he was summoned to the palace by the queen, Sagim kindly threatened to tell the king everything if she didn't stop scheming. Therefore, Queen Tati permanently silenced him by brutally torturing him to death. Once he was dead, she was satisfied, as he was the only one in the kingdom of Tongu who knew about the pact and prophecy. She was also able to find the royal hide, which she gave to her men to destroy. Sagim's only son, who was barely grown, had to be given to one of the other elders of the council to be raised. The queen pretended to be quite aggrieved by the untimely death of the Giryot, and since his wife had also passed on earlier whilst giving birth to their child, she promised to make sure that their son was well taken care of. She urged the elder raising the boy to come to her with anything that the boy and even his family might need henceforth. As the years went by, the queen became even crueler to her subjects, especially the royal slaves. She would have the uninterested slaves raped and forcefully married to their rapists, just so no girl is left unmarried in her palace. One day she was orchestrating a forced marriage between one of her slaves, a beautiful girl named Kubra Ture, to one of the guards, with the support of some council members. When the king walked in, he found Kubra hopelessly weeping over her plight, as that was the only way she could show her dissent to the queen's decision to marry her off to someone she neither knew nor loved. The king immediately demanded to be told what was going on. The queen looked at one of the elders and motioned for him to explain. "Your Majesty, Kubra here is pregnant with the child of Butler Tito, a guard from your royal army, and as tradition demands, they are to marry." "If that is the case, then why is she crying?" the king questioned. He was puzzled by Kubra's reluctance to marry a man of noble blood for whom she was carrying a child. "Is this not to be welcomed by you, my girl? Or do you not want to be emancipated from slavery?" the king asked, now looking at Kubra. Kubra saw this as her opportunity to speak up and save herself from what she thought to be even worse than slavery. She never wanted the union she was proposed to by guard Tito, which is why he had this done to her to have her marry him by force. "Your Majesty, but Latito raped me while I was asleep in our quarters." Kubra cried out to him, running to kneel before him. There was a loud gasp from the crowd as they looked on and listened to the poor slave's account of the events that took place. "Silence!" the queen screamed. "And why didn't you shout for help? I am sure you were not utterly paralyzed." The queen was now getting agitated and angry at the king for allowing a lowly slave an audience with him. "He drugged me, Your Majesty. I was unconscious." Kubra cried again as the other guards moved to pull her away from the king. "Lies, all lies. She was wide awake, Your Highness. In fact, she came to me in my chambers, sire." But Latito jumped in to defend himself, now scared of getting in trouble over the stupid slave's allegations. Unfortunately, he was not a good liar. "No, I did not. This is not true, Your Majesty. You had me drugged and taken to your chambers. I can swear this before the oracle, Your Majesty." Kubra screamed at the guard with all her might. She prayed that the king, who was always just and fair, would give her a chance to prove herself. "Very well then, so you shall. Both of you, first thing tomorrow morning, will come before the shrine," the king declared as he sat on his majestic throne made of iron and gold, next to his young queen. The council of the elders all agreed to the king's decision. However, Queen Tati and Butler Tito were not happy. They both knew with whom the truth lay and were sure of the outcome of tomorrow's proceedings. The queen quickly thought of another plan. As for Butler Tito, he decided to accept his guilt and any punishment deemed fit by the king. He was just about to confess to the king when the queen shouted, "You shall be taken to the oracle by some council members and a few guards to witness this," she announced with her gaze firmly set on Butler Tito. She attempted to reassure him with her gaze that everything was going to work out fine. This, however, did not settle the guard's nerves, as he was certain that the queen most likely had an even worse plan up her sleeves. Just as Tito had feared, Kubra was to be killed on their way to the oracle, and the story of her getting killed as she tried running away would be told as a cover for her murder. Tito was not happy about this new plan, as he had begun to fall in love with Kubra, and he really harbored hope that she would one day grow to love him back. At this point, Tito greatly regretted ever going along with the queen's plan to rape the poor girl in the first place. Knowing the queen and how she rose to invoke fear in her subjects, she would never let Kubra go scot-free of disobeying her. Tito wanted to run away with her. He approached the queen to beg for mercy on behalf of Kubra. He told her of his love for the slave girl, but was disappointed at the queen's reactions to his plea. She would not even grant him an audience with her. She ordered the guards to remind Tito that it was because of her that he even had a chance with the wretched girl in the first place. He was told that her fate was decided, and if he ever muttered a word to any soul, the queen would see to it that he and his family pay dearly. Tito begged for an audience with her again when he was refused. With this, the queen ordered her guards to chase him away because she wanted to be left alone to tend to her son Alan, whom she had given birth to by that time. He was just a year old and still a nursing child, and he was also the apple of her eye and the one she treasures the most in the world. But Tito was warned by his friends to forget about Kubra and side with the queen, but his conscience would not let him, even after being promised great wealth and fortunes by the queen. He knew that if he insisted on saving the girl, he would never succeed, so he decided to pretend to be brought to the queen's side by the promise of wealth. Later that night, as everyone slept, he snuck into where Kubra was being held captive to save her. When she saw him sneaking in, she nearly screamed for help, but he jumped at her, his hands firmly covering her mouth. He reassured her that he was not going to harm her and that he was there to free her. He willed her to run as fast as she could until she was certain that she was out of the kingdom and out of harm's way. "I'm sorry for what I've done. Please find it in your heart to forgive me. But right now you must run." She shuddered as he finished the last part of his statement, seeing how genuine he was, then began to mutter, "But the king ordered..." "The queen ordered to have you killed on your way to the oracle." They both heard the drums of the palace and learned that their plot has been found out. Therefore, they knew the guards were coming for them. The drums were only beaten when there was trouble in the palace or when a ceremony is about to take place in the palace, and it takes little time for the palace to be surrounded by guards. Kubra and Tito started running as fast as they could, but Tito did not make it out. He was shot by one of the guards' arrow and it pierced through his heart, mortally wounding him. As he fell, observing the arrow in his chest, he yelped in pain, realizing his nigh end. And just as he was taking his last breaths, he shouted out the path she should follow to escape. It was one of the most secured and hidden passages out of the palace, and Kubra will be halfway out of the kingdom before the guards can get to her. He wished her well and silently bid her goodbye as he was slowly losing his breath. He will not even let her wait to see his last breath being drawn, as the guards were by now hot on their pursuit. Kubra followed his advice and managed to escape safely. This angered the queen to no end. The next morning, she quickly went to the king with her own version of the events because she did not want him hearing it from anyone else. "Tito was found dead during last night's raid," the queen explained to the king the next morning. He could not understand. He knew that the palace drum were beaten the night before because of a little upheaval at the palace dungeon, but he did not think that the matter was that serious. The queen told him that butler Tito was killed by Kubra as she tried to escape from captivity. She was the reason for the raid. "I suppose she did not want the oracle striking her for lying," she explained. As she went on, the king was beside himself with regret for conceding to the slave girl's request, which was why she told him so he would just agree to her ruling whenever something like that occurred again. However, the king was also puzzled at how Kubra, a slave with no military experience, could overpower a seasoned butler like Tito and kill him. The whole account never made much sense to him, but he accepted it as the truth anyhow because of his guilt. He then gave orders to the guards to search the length and breadth of all 5 kingdoms for the slave girl and promised a handsome reward to anyone who did. Queen Tati then requested to be the one to handle catching Kubra, which King Sayumba immediately approved.